riding through the dusty plains so wide, seeking answers in the vast wild tide. Night and dark in constant dance so slow, heading into the great unknown. I go in the shadow, I find my way, guided by that dawn of day.
She said he had no face. Tell her it can be tough finding men without faces. The priest continued speaking to Maria as she sat there, rocking back and forth, squeezing her prayer beads. He spoke in her native language, occasionally turning back to me to translate what she said. His accent was thick, too. I could have used a translator from my translator. But there was no time to quibble with vocabulary. I got the gist. A man had taken her child in the dead of night. I was fixing to find the child and make the man pay for what he had done to this family.
She wants to know if it's true. What they say about you.
I was waiting for this coffee to kill my hangover as I asked the priest, what exactly did they say about me?
They say you walk through the shadows. That is how you find the dark men.
I tipped my hat up so I could lean forward and let him see my eyes. Tell her that's precisely right. I fear no man, of this earth or any other. The woman clamped her hands together in my direction, praising me to her heaven.
She says thank you.
I leaned back as the bottom of my back creaked ever so tightly. Tell her no thank yous till she got her child back. Till then, I'm no better than the boots on my feet. Boots that had seen better days every day since they was born. My left big toe was standing upright through the melted leather, giving everyone in the room a, "Hey, how do you do?" The money I was about to get for this job would allow an upgrade from head to hello toe. Mama Maria had created a little makeshift bed for me to lumber in till the storm passed. The rain was strong. You could hear the wind choking as it tried to breathe through the downfall. Adobe bricks, thick walls, pitched roof covered in tiles of red clay. There were no more than 10 pews on the right and left side. A tiny church by any measure. Mama Maria gave me a big hug. Father Penna shook my hand. They thanked me profusely, even though I had just told them not to yet till the job was done. After they walked out, I lay down to try and get a little shut-eye with only my knapsack and that skinny fella pinned to a cross keeping me company. I could hear raindrops hitting the insides of 4 different buckets placed around the church, each one trying to prevent the wood flooring from becoming even more moldy than they already was. The lightning lit up the rose-colored glass behind Jesus. I never much cared for the big fella in the sky that people looked up to. Needless to say, his son didn't do much for me either. No, sir. When you seen the devil as many times as I had, God carried about as much weight as a butterfly. But at least I had seen a butterfly. Most people would have been up all night. Between the storm, the bucket plops, the scratching wind, it didn't stop for hours. Me? I slept like a baby. The only thing that could keep me up was silence. Silence meant my mind was free to wander. That's when it ended up in dark places. Places that I was not keen to revisit. Places that most people might not ever come back from. This is why it was good to keep my mind busy, such as it was now, knowing that tomorrow I'd have to wake up and go find the boy that people told me was taken by the Shadow Man. Sun broke early. Missy, my Mustang, was still shivering from the night before. Poor Missy had been holed up inside a tiny church all night. She was less religious than me, so you can imagine how perturbed she was to head on towards a 3-day hike after a poor night's sleep. I had won Missy in a card game 4 years ago in Missouri. I had 2 aces, and the former owner of Missy was bluffing. All men have tells. The devil is in the details, they say. And this fellow would give just the slightest wrinkle in his nose any time he had less than an ideal hand. King high. He lost Missy with a king high. Missy deserved better. How could you bet such a beautiful horse and such a despicable hand? Why quibble with the why when you can enjoy the who, which was me and Missy making another long trek towards the mountains? Missy was no stranger to this journey. If memory serves, we had done this exact walk 7 times prior. The distance from the Texas border near El Paso to the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, particularly the area around Taos, is approximately 275 miles north, give or take. If we keep a moderate pace of 4 miles per hour, it's roughly 75 hours of riding time. Yes, sir. In 4 days, I would have that child back in my hand. The other hand would have the eyes of the beast that took it. I always cut out the eyes of the beast I was paid to hunt. Windows to the soul, they say. If they got no soul, well, behold the great wonders of eternal damnation. Have you ever seen it? Eyes so black you can see 'em in the pitch black of night. I would not recommend such an endeavor. Every time it takes a little bit out of me. So why do it? 'Cause someone has to feed on the monsters. Let 'em know they will not consume us. That was my job. Devour the devils.
Along the barren roads where dust settles slow, I'll wander these paths where the wild grasses grow. The stars hang in silence, yet they seem to know. I'll walk this earth alone in shadows below. Devil waits for those who seek him in the night where fears grow dim. I'll face my demons without fear till the morning light appears.
Mustangs are smaller than many modern breeds, standing around 13 to 15 hands high. This made him more agile and well-suited to maneuvering through rough terrain, which is what this walk would most certainly be. Rough. Missy was bay-colored, coarse mane, tough as nails. She would have done just fine without me, and she knew it too. It took me a minute to get her settled. Her previous owner had been less than attentive. She was smarter than him by a country mile. The first time I ever made this trip was almost 8 years ago. Back then I had a thoroughbred. They'll do just dandy in a race, but when it comes to pushing through a storm, adept they are not. No, sir. I had to make the last 12 miles on foot after that horse collapsed. He had gotten some kind of infection that couldn't be treated from the middle of nowhere. It was a lesson learned with 100 volts of lightning. Luckily, the man I'd been sent to track down had a horse, for which I would acquire for my own transport. Briefly. I believe I sold it for a trunk of cigarettes. Hell of a habit. Nicotine. I do not recommend it for those lacking in willpower. Fortune for me, it was a vice I had since kicked to the red dirt, along with alcohol, promiscuous ladies, and gambling. The one vice I could not kick, the one vice that had sunk its claws into me at a ripe age, the one vice I had long ago sworn off even trying to run from. This was the vice known as brutality. You can classify the acts of this term into many designations, but I think you know what it means. There is a pendulum in this world of good and evil, light and dark. I like to think that we are in control of this swing, but that would be foolish. For as long as we have been, and for as long as we will be, man will always conquer evil by destroying man. So here we go, round and round and round. Blessed are those who remain naive, those who live a life free of brutality. I am not one of those men. No, sir. I, for as long as I can remember, have always felt more comfortable walking through the world when the sun sleeps.
Day turned dark, shadows falling on the ground, and life feels so hollow in this little town. Heartache riding high on these fleeting dreams.
Life ain't as golden as it seems. When the sun gleams, the devil feeds. Shadows dance with a heartbeat. Dusty roads echo tales of the past. The wind whispers truths that never last. Whiskey pours like sorrow's lonely hymn, while the stars gaze quietly, growing dim. When the sun bleeds, the devil feeds. Lost souls wander.
There was only one place to hide. The mountains had become a breeding ground for the demons. How ironic that it was those who practiced the teaching of God the least seemed most inclined to live closest to him, up above, where they could look down, like vultures, waiting for the right time to swoop in and take what is not theirs to have. I had originally stumbled upon this dwelling of darkness by accident, back when I had just turned 18 and was forced to take refuge far from town, more specifically, far from the law. I had broken the face of a man who had slashed the face of a lady I was sweet on. Apparently, he did not feel the need to pay her for the services she provided. You know the services of which I refer. So he took the end of a broken bottle and cut up the left side of her face. So I did what I felt was most appropriate in this situation. I took his face and roasted it over an open fire. Who doesn't love s'mores in the wintertime? Turns out this fellow was the son of a sheriff, Sheriff Hackman to be precise. I didn't kill his son. I just made his face unrecognizable. The punishment felt correct, in my eyes at least. The law and Sheriff Hackman did not agree, so I was forced to go live far away for some time, until a time in which my body would help disguise me from the wanted posters that had originally resembled me almost impeccably. It was on the 6th night that I first heard it, the growl. I was hunkered in a cave. I parked up against the wall of the cave while the fire crackled in front of me. I could see its eyes as it approached. The fire in its eyes matched the crackle that had been keeping me warm. But these eyes were different. They were cold. I would suspect it had expected me to run, at which point I would be lost in the dark, and it could strike down from whichever direction it most desired. But I did not run. I did not even move, not until it was right in front of me. And then it stopped. I could tell it felt some sort of kinship with me, like a papa bear stumbling into one of her cubs. Sadly for this daddy, I did not care much for kinship, so I took out my Arkansas toothpick and slashed his throat. The shriek made pop both of my eardrums. It was so loud my eyes started to water. It tried to run, but it could only get about 10 feet before the black blood oozing from its neck began to twist it around, its fur-covered arms swinging wildly from side to side. It fell to the cave floor, struggling for air. I got to my knees and carved out its eyes, its long, jellyfish eyes. I picked up a log and dropped it onto the belly of the beast so I could watch it burn. Even in the dead of night, I could see the black ash rising into the dark air. The smell was horrific. I followed the tracks toward the end of a cave. Buried into the back was a child. Just its bones and its face. The beast had left the face perfectly intact, but it had eaten the rest of the meat clean off. It is in such moments that I am grateful for my penchant towards brutality. From then on, if I saw the poster of a missing child, I knew where it had been taken. The beast I had burned was not alone. No, sir. It would be downright silly to believe that darkness does not have a family. We are all born from one and two. Such is the case with that first beast, and the second, and the third. I had to be pretty close to 30 at this point, a pawn in this game of mayhem. Every couple months I would find a poster, some sweet little child, some grieving parents. I would offer my services. Sometimes I would find the child, sometimes I would find the bones. For evidence of my journey, and to give the parents some semblance of closure, I would return with the remains of the little ones. As gruesome as it was, I do believe that it helped them to move on. There is no greater pain than to not know. On more than one occasion, local law enforcement would attempt to come with me, to try and understand why I, and only I, had become so skilled at tracking down these lost children. This is when legend started to grow. My legend. Most lawmen didn't even make it to the caves. The storms were too harsh. The conditions were too rough. But on my 7th trip, Deputy Riley made it all the way to the cave. He saw what I saw. The beast. The orange eyes crawling towards our open fire. He froze. I did not. I did what I always done ever since returning to the caves. I cut out its eyes. All myth becomes fact when left unchecked. This is how I became the man who can walk through shadows. Because Deputy Riley could not corroborate my account. Fortunately, on that particular mission, we had found the child alive. It had become apparent to me that these beasts do not feed quickly. They like to watch the children cry and yell for at least a week, calling out for their parents. These beasts savor the pain, the anguish. To them, pain is the appetizer. Flesh is the entree. You might be wondering how one can cut through the neck of a beast with the toothpick. Well, that's 'cause an Arkansas toothpick ain't a toothpick at all. It just so happens to be a knife. A big, sharp knife that had saved my life more times than I can count. It's got a long, slender blade that tapers to a point, making it effective as both a utility knife and a weapon. The handle is often made of wood or bone, and the knife's overall length can be quite imposing, sometimes reaching 18 inches or more. Toothpick came from the look of it. It reflects the knife's slim, pointed blade. The Arkansas part of the name is believed to refer to the region where the knife was popularized, though some accounts suggest it could be linked to the high-quality steel produced in the region. The origin was never as much interest to me. I got mine from Diego. Diego was a sweet older Spaniard that let me sleep in his barn. I was no older than 14 back then. I didn't know where I was going. Even if I did, I don't know how much longer I could have tried getting there, seeing as how I did not have any food or water. This was my life at the time, bouncing from ranch hand to ranch hand, until they eventually cut me loose. Me and all the other people who had a less than prestigious family heritage. Diego found me in that barn late one night. Rather than kick me out or aim a rifle, he asked if I needed water. I nodded. He returned with a full pail, then he left till morning, at which point his wife and very young daughter offered me some breakfast. I had not ever had a proper breakfast. Eggs, bacon, potatoes. I ate like a king. I did not deserve such a meal. I told them so. Even though the language barrier between us was steep, he asked if I knew how to take care of horses. I did, I told him. He said if I can help take care of horses, I could stay in his barn. I thank him, many times. I would never be able to thank him enough for the generosity provided by him and his family. He would never know my gratitude, not until his daughter was taken by the Shadow Man. I swore to him that if I ever found the man who took his daughter, I would take his eyes, and I did. during that first night in the cave. Diego's daughter had been taken 4 years before I ever stepped foot in that cave. There were no signs of her. Whatever remained of her remains had probably turned to dust. But I offered the eyes to Diego anyway, explaining that this beast had taken another young one. So it stood within reason that these eyes were the last thing his daughter saw. He took them, and the tiny wooden box I had placed them inside of. He wrapped his bandana around it, thanking me. He could not look me in the eyes. I understand why. It was the last time we ever spoke. Better to break at dawn than dusk. The beast slept during the day. This is when I like to strike. Truth be told, there was an extra thrill in slicing out its eyes during the pitch black, knowing that was when they felt most alive. But I was not a young man anymore. I had enough cuts and scrapes from head to my hello toes that ego could be reasonably checked at the door. I was just dandy to stand over this shadow man and cut out its black beating heart while it laid in lumber. Today would be no different. Missy was in a good mood. She had a belly full of carrots and apples. Her diet was the envy of all other Mustangs we ran across, which was few. I, too, was feeling good. Diego had taught me how to make chili. It was my main course any time I was on bounty patrol. Lord have mercy if it didn't hit the spot every time. It was filling. I needed a belly full before heading up the mountainside. Missy would hang behind once we hit the entryway to the caves. She was never in favor of that. She'd stomp and plead to leave. I can't blame her. Nothing but savagery inside. Excluding a brief sun shower on the third day, our trip through the plains was a breeze. Maybe the sweetest one we ever had together. All I needed was my lantern, some water, and my Arkansas toothpick. The three main ingredients for a rescue mission's last legs. If you're wondering why these beasts never found a home, you'd be correct to wonder. My deepest fear was that one day I'd come here, and it would be empty. It would mean they found a new home. I supposed if you asked me to ponder, I'd say that this was the closest sanctuary to where children reside. How long had they lived here? How many children had they taken? How many families had they destroyed? What were they? Where had they come from? A more intellectual man might let these questions consume him. I was not that type of man. The only consumption on my mind were their eyes. Those bloodthirsty orange eyes piercing through the cold black air. I gave Missy a quick pat and told her I'd be back in a jiffy. She nodded, in the way pets nod. Sometimes they know you better than you know yourself. They see when you're alone. Adios, Missy. Time to go play hero. Follow the walls. This was the key to navigating the caves. The beasts did not move on the ground. They would climb the walls with their claws. Sometimes you'd be able to spot markings on the walls that were not from them. They were smaller, remnants of blood. These were from the children. Can you imagine waking up to this nightmare of being dragged through what felt like the bottom of the ocean by some snarling, sniveling monster with its sharp teeth and salivating long vertical mouths? I can't. That's why the thought of having one of my own children was not an option, not with the knowledge that they could be taken away one day. No, sir. Having a family could not be a consideration until I had confirmation that all of these things had been destroyed, once and for all. I could hear something, scraping against the walls. It sounded like cackling. The only time I heard them speak was when I was expediting their last breaths. They were like bats. Even when they touched the ground you stood upon, it still felt as if they were hovering above you, waiting to strike. Luckily, I had the same mentality. I heard it again, cackling, sliding up and down the cave walls. The sound grew louder. It was drawing me closer. It had to know that I could hear it. Things that moved through shadows were nothing if not stealth. I suspected this was some kind of trap, so I turned off the lantern. It was time to go blind. Let the sounds of the cackle and the touch of the walls guide me until I found what I had been sent to find. The ground felt progressively cold, deep, as if I was walking through the edge of a beach, my hello toes dipping into the sandy floor beneath me. The cackling grew louder, though. I was close. I could hear it. I could feel it. I could sense it. And then I saw it, sitting there, in front of a fire, staring down at the crackling flames. I couldn't see its eyes. It was the only thing I could not see, its head slightly lowered. This was not the beast I had encountered each and every time I had been here before. This was something new. There was something about the skin, something about the hair, something about the hands. It looked almost painted on, as if the beast had skinned a man's flesh and glued it above his own. Finally, it spoke.
What is it?
There was a lone log, big, on the other side of the flame. Surely this was a trap. This beast thought I could not see through it. For the very reason that it was shielding its eyes, I stayed standing and took out my toothpick. Where's the child? The beast reached down with its right hand, lifted up the end of a blanket. There she was, asleep, comfortably, looking just like the missing poster had described. I turned back to the beast. You gonna hand her over, or do I need to expedite the process? The beast slowly laid the blanket over her face and said,
Won't you sit? Just for a minute, so we may speak.
I couldn't help but be intrigued. These beasts had never spoken before, and now all of a sudden they was trying to bargain. Quite the adaptation on their part. The white flag was waving proudly. I gripped my toothpick as I sat down, never for once looking anywhere but its face.
Thank you,
It said.
I hope my appearance is suitable.
Actually, I'd prefer you in your natural form. At least that would feel honest.
I can assure you, this is me at my most truthful.
My interest piqued. The accent. I couldn't quite place it. Sort of from all over. But I told it that a minute was very long, so I'd better get on with whatever it meant to get on with.
I humbly ask, sir, that you leave us alone.
I smiled. The nerve. You almost had to appreciate it. Cowardice can be so entertaining when it's presented so nakedly. I'ma ask you to repeat that. The beast seemed nervous.
You see, sir, the child and all of the other children, they are not for us. They are for him.
And this him you speak of, who may I say is that?
You have given him many names over time, to each their own, as we have heard it said. But you see, if he does not feed, he will consume in other ways, to be appeased.
I nodded my head, and then tilted it ever so slightly, trying to get a glimmer of those eyes. And then I told this coward, How about you go get your boss? I can give him an answer directly, seeing how you seem to be increasingly inconsequential." The beast raised its hands. I could see the human skin beginning to fade, revealing the black fur that was starting to push through the palms of whatever poor soul had not been lucky enough to make it out of these caves.
"I ask you again, sir, please go now. Let us appease him. For if not, he will come into your world in other ways, no longer through the shadows. Slowly over time, the shadows will begin to disappear, and one day he will walk through the light, and this world will no longer be yours."
I stood up, dusting off my backside, and gave him a proposition. "Tell you what, Padre, there's something I'll take." Finally, for the first time, it looked up.
"Anything, sir, anything."
I took out my toothpick, aimed it at him, and said, "Your eyes." Pure joy. That was the sight I came to see once the child had been returned to her family. They cried so loud upon her warm embrace that I thought the church was going to capsize below me. Damn near every person in this tiny town had come inside to celebrate the return of this sweet little child. One by one they thanked me, praising me. A couple elderly folks even got down to their knees, as if I was some kind of god. I told them to stand up. That was not necessary. Even the money that the town had raised, unnecessary. They needed it more than me. Besides, I had saved up a decent amount. My next stop was the ocean. I wouldn't need boots there. No, sir. I heard that the water was so blue on the coast it looked like the sky. And sometimes you wouldn't know if you was swimming or floating. I had seen it in my dreams, many times. When I closed my eyes out on those long trips along the plains, I could see it. So blue, so bright. I could almost feel the cool between my fingertips, sun beating down between my cheeks. Yeah, it was about time I stopped playing hunter and started playing husband. I offered the eyes to the girl's father, the black, melted eyes of the beast. The father asked that I bury the eyes, as deep as I could dig. I obliged. The townsfolk begged me to stay, for at least a meal. I kindly thanked him, but then I said me and Missy best be on our way. And so we went, with a bag full of apples and carrots. The distance from El Paso, Texas to the Gulf of Mexico was about 600 miles. I gathered we'd be there in 2 weeks, barring any unforeseen circumstances or storms. About 2 days into the trip, which up until that point was lovelier than fresh pie, came what was known as the New Madrid earthquakes. They was a series of powerful tremors between December 16, 1811, and February 7, 1812, centered around the town of New Madrid, Missouri. The most significant quake, estimated at around magnitude 7.5 to 8.0, struck on December 16th, causing widespread destruction across the central United States. December 16th. Only 3 days after that beast spoke to me about the ways in which the true evil would lash out and, as he said, consume us. I never paid no real mind to that mumbo-jumbo he spoke of. You can apply the works of the devil to anything that happens if you are so motivated. But sitting on that beach, staring at the endless blue, resting comfortably under the bright sun, my mind began to wander.
Walk this earth alone my own. In the night I hear the moan. Devil waits for those who roam. But I keep on all a stone. Oh, the shadows finally in the darkness fade across the lonesome road where the wild winds blow. Footsteps echo, but I stand alone. Desert skies and dust in the air. The devil's whispering, but I don't get scared. Oh, the shadows